All right, welcome to the virtual PowerShell group. We are going to do the last presentation of June, and this is all about the SQL Server Provider. For those of you who don't know, we'll go over what the SQL Server Provider is, where you get it, and why you care. It's a cool tool thing. It's a great tool, and Microsoft has done a great job in helping us PowerShell people to get a good handle on things that are going on in the SQL world with this provider. You'll see the power of it as we move forward and do things with it, but this is going to be a fun thing. Now, I will share the beginning, in the beginning, what this presentation will be like. Hopefully, you'll be able to follow along. I chose this presentation style because a lot of people have talked to me and told me that they just don't know how to get started, and some presentations, especially PowerShell, can go right over your head when there's a lot of pre-baked things that you just execute, and you don't ever see any of the problems that people have when they use PowerShell. So the way this is going to work is the PowerShell, this presentation will be like this. I will have 3 scripts that show you some things about the provider. And then from there, it will be me following some form of a script of tasks. And I purposely did some things that I haven't done recently so that you can see how you can fumble around and you can learn how to get into the provider. If I just quickly went through the provider and showed you all these things and it was all cool, it would be nice, and you could go review the deck and you could go review the video. But the problem with that is that a lot of people want to see how they would do it if they were doing it. And sometimes you fumble. And it's fun to fumble because you stumble into things, you're like, oh yeah, I remember now. And so that's the style of this presentation, is from a look of a user that is using it, not from a master who's just wowing you with things that are going on. So this is almost watch Ben go through the SQL Provider from scratch and learn how to navigate it. So don't get distraught. It's meant to be this way. I meant to be not scripted so that you could see it. So let's get started. So the first thing that you need to know is the contact information on the left. I am DBA Duck everywhere. In the top right, you'll see ben@benmiller.net. That's my email address. And then my website is dbaduck.com. So if you need to reach out to me, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all over the place as DBA Duck and my website. So please feel free to email me. I've already had people this last little while email me, and I appreciate the support and the trust, but I am happy to help get you through some hard times or some things that are just plaguing you. So don't hesitate to reach out to DBA Duck. We're good to go. All right, so this is how fast the slides will go. The agenda is basically what is a provider in PowerShell, so you understand where we're going, where we started and why we care about this. And then the SQL Server Provider itself will illustrate some of the things that it does and why. And then it'll be demo time. So there's not much slides because I'd rather not talk about things. I'd rather show you the things and have you see how they do it. All right, so first, we need to understand what a provider is. The most important thing here in a provider is that in PowerShell, there is a native thing called a provider, and I'll show you them when we go into demo. But basically, the premise is a provider is meant to represent object structures in a path-like structure. So think about C drive, think about File Explorer, think about Object Explorer. File Explorer, you go C, and then you go Windows, System 32, and you go further into the path. And that is a file system provider in PowerShell. There's tons of providers that PowerShell natively provides. And so SQL Server has one in its module called SQL Server, and it has a SQL Server provider. So we'll show you that. But there's a file system provider. Think about registry. You navigate it. It is a little bit different because it has a property of a folder and an item, but it's still a path-like structure. HT local machine, software, Microsoft, on and on and on. So it is able to be represented like a file system or like a path. So it has a provider. Variables, it has a provider. You can actually go to a variable drive and PS Drive is a provider. And that's how we're going to represent SQL Server if the provider is through a PS Drive. So the big deal, here's the big deal about providers. Inside your File Explorer, you can highlight something and hit delete. And that is a native OS command. Just delete, or you can go into the command prompt and say delete file and it will delete it. In PowerShell, they have commandlets, and there's a remove item. Now they've aliased some of these with things like remove item is del. And then get child item is actually dir. Things that us old people remember back in the DOS days when we had a black box, and that's all we had. We didn't really have a Windows interface. It gives you this black thing that we ran command, cd, dir, cd backslash, cd dot dot. I mean, all those work in PowerShell because it is a shell, just like command prompt. So the idea is that inside code, which I'm going to show you the contrast a little bit in demo so you can see what the contrast is. But inside code of PowerShell, you're going to see remove item, and you can do a remove item in a PowerShell provider of SQL, and it will actually drop a table. You don't have to go into Management Studio or something and say drop table. You can just remove item and remove that item, and it will actually issue the right commands to SQL to drop that table. So it's pretty slick. It responds just like a file system and lets you do all these things, dir and type them, everything like that. So that's what a provider is, ability to represent an object structure, in this case, SQL Server objects, databases, tables, columns, indexes, keys, all of that is represented in an object structure like path. And we get full fidelity objects when we get the items out. So it's pretty darn cool. The SQL Server Provider, just think of it like Object Explorer and SSMS. Now, it's not identical. They didn't really pattern it per se after Management Studio. So just because you can expand something and they have a folder underneath it, doesn't mean that you're going to have that folder. And it doesn't mean that SSMS has all of the things that you're going to see. I'll show you how many more things there are in the PowerShell Provider than you see in Management Studio. The idea of Management Studio is to help you be able to get to the SQL objects that you care about or the most common, so they don't have to build this monolithic tool that does everything in its DOM. We do T-SQL stuff, we can do PowerShell stuff, so it's not all about that. But paths are really powerful, and this is the one of the things I wanted to illustrate. Anybody who's familiar with PowerShell knows that we can do string replace things in strings. So that $server in the bottom string. SQL Server colon is the name of the default drive. SQL is the engine of our path. And then $server. Well, that's not the name of my server, but $server is a variable that if I have that set to a server name, that represents a server name, and it can actually be replaced. And you can do a dir of this thing. The instance, this is a structure we'll show you in the demo. I can do a different instance and then backslash databases. And that is like you expanding the server and expanding the databases container. There's a few differences, which I'll show you, but it's very important to understand that it's just a path. And it can be used just like a path in the file system with different things to replace parts of it, directories, collections, and stuff like that. So that's pretty much all you need to know at this point, because you're going to see most. And that's it. There's your slide. So all good there. You are welcome to ask questions as we go. I will have the question thing popped up for me to make sure that I can see it. And if you have questions during the presentation, I'll try to manage them. We'll definitely have time for Q&A at the end. So you're welcome to ask and wait. If you want to wait till the end of the presentation, you're welcome to do that too. So today we're going to be using Azure Data Studio. I could use the PowerShell window. I mean, PowerShell window works too. I can use PowerShell 7. There's some things that don't work in PowerShell 7, but there's most of it's there. But we won't be using PowerShell 7. I just wanted to illustrate you could. We're going to be using Azure Data Studio instead of the PowerShell window, just because we get an editor and we get a window. If it starts misbehaving, it shouldn't because it's native PowerShell. We have the native PowerShell one instead of the integrated provider. If it gets misbehaving, then we will fix that and we'll go there. The one thing I do want to make sure you understand about the PowerShell provider is that the PowerShell provider, the SQL Server module that contains the PowerShell provider only works in version 5.1. So if you don't have Windows or PowerShell 5.1 and above, the module will not load. It has a requirement in the manifest to say you have to have 5.1. So upgrade, you can download 5.1 just by searching for WMF. So Windows Management Framework, WMF 5.1 download, and it will let you install on most operating systems that are modern. I believe you can actually install it on 2008 R2 Windows, but hopefully you're not there. The best thing to do would be to get a more modern operating system, install the module, install the 5.1 on that one, and then point to your servers. Because the other thing we'll learn about the PowerShell provider is that you don't have to only work on the local machine. I'll be working on my local machine because that's where SQL is, but for this demo. But I can point to another server somewhere else and it will work. So it's pretty slick. I will also be going over how you use the PowerShell provider with SQL authentication. By default, it uses Windows. So let's get started with this. First thing we do is we start a transcript. So we have all the commands and all the output in a file. So when we get done, we can go back and review that file. I will include the transcript that we'll be running here. I'll include that in the downloads for the thing. So I'm going to do C demos, and I'm just going to say SQL provider transcript.txt. Okay, so we'll run that. Make sure my F8 keys work. Okay, good. So we started the transcript. Now everything we do and run in this little window down here will actually be kept in that TXT file. And you'll get it with the download. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the module SQL Server. Now, if you don't have the module SQL Server, we're going to digress for a second. And we're going to show this. Get dash module, list available SQL Server. Now, in my case, I have lots of versions. So I have 18.221, which is the latest. So if I go back and I import module SQL Server, it'll load it, and you'll see it'll come back once it's loaded. And it's loaded lots of things that it needs, including the provider. What I didn't show you is I'll show you this. Before I import module SQL Server, if I do get dash PS drive, we will not see a SQL Server drive. Okay, so just be aware, there's no SQL Server drive yet, but you can see HKCU, HKLM, they're of registry type, and HKey current user, and HKey local machine. There's a variable drive. There's an ENV drive, which is your environment. There's a certificate drive, cert. There's a function drive. There's all sorts of things. So just wanted to show that there wasn't one here, but when I go back to Azure Data Studio and I say get module, it'll tell me that the SQL Server module is loaded. Sure enough, right there, 21.118.221. And if I do get PS drive, so let's just add get PS drive here. Shouldn't type in demos because it makes you nervous. You'll see that there is indeed a SQL Server drive now that starts at SQL Server colon. So it loaded this, and the provider type is SQL Server. So that's the cool thing. We're going to get out of the way the first thing, and this is all for you. I'm not going to run every command here because I want you to see what you can do. But this is for you to go through later. In order for you to get to the drives, you just CD into them, or you could, instead of CD, it is actually set location. So if you did that, then it would set location to HKLM, and then you can start doing dir and all that stuff. So that's what this file's for. We're going to look at providers here just to say that it's the SQL Server drive, and we get that by importing the module. And there's other things to do. Most of them are related to getting to your database, so you can just replace your database stuff. And we won't look at the module yet, but I wanted you to have these files, so I just wanted you to see. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into our provider here, and we're going to CD into it. So if I do CD SQL Server, and again, I do capitalize just to show you that you can do it, but PowerShell is case insensitive, so you don't have to worry about that. If I do CD SQL Server, you'll see my prompt is a little different. It shows me where I'm at up here in the green, so that's why it's that way. If I do dir, I see what's in the SQL Server root of the drive. I see DAC, and this is actually the data tier application, so think DAC pack, not dedicated admin connection. That's not the DAC that we use to get into the dedicated admin connection. Data collection, SQL policy. This is your policy-based management. And it has a description over here so you can read it. SQL registrations. Ooh, you can get to your registrations, whether they be on a management server or whether they be on your local machine. And I'll show you, I can't remember if I have any on here, but I'll show you how to get to them. And this is where we're going to be spending our time today, SQL. SQL is the SQL Server database engine. That's where we're going to do most of our work today, just to have fun. SSIS, you can also get to the SSIS integration services stuff, which is fun. And then there's an X events. That's a topic for a whole nother day. But there's some cool things about this X event things that you can do. And then there's finally analysis services that you can get to your analysis services databases. So right now we're going to go into SQL. And as you can see, SQL was capitalized and I typed in small and I still ended up in SQL. So it's all case insensitive. Here's where it gets tricky. When I go dir, it's going to show me the machine name, and the machine name will be the name of your current local machine if you have a SQL Server instance on it. It knows how to read that out of the registry. Because I do, it has my name of my machine. If I have connected to another remote server, so say I have BenBook 3 and it's another machine on the network, and I connected to that by CD space and then BenBook 3, then it would show up in here. And I'll show you how that works. If I CD into localhost, which is just another name for your local machine, it did it and said my path is now SQL localhost. But now if I CD back the ... and I do a dir, watch, localhost is now in the list because it's successfully connected to that machine. So this list could be bigger depending on how many machines you've connected to remotely. So don't panic if you only see one and you're like, yeah, but I have tons of them on my network. It's okay. But everyone you've connected to will show up in this list. So we're in SQL. We're going to go to BenBook 2. Now I'm going to do a dir, and this is where the instance is. Remember on my string, I had SQL and then the machine, and then the next piece is the instance. And in this case, I don't have an instance. It's a default instance, and therefore it changed directories. I can change directories to default. Now, there's a little bit of information. It tells me what version it is. So it's actually version 2016. It's RTM with no updates. So, and then it's Windows platform. If I did this to a Linux box, I'd need to do SQL authentication, but I'll show you that in just a second. So default is the word used in light of that you have a default instance. If I had a named instance called S1, I would CD into S1. And I would see it here. If I have multiple instances on this machine, I would be able to see those here. If I CD'd into a different machine, then it would still go catalog the instances in that different machine in your directory. So that's kind of cool. So I'll CD into default. Now I'm going to do a dir and see what's in the instance. Now here's where it gets tricky in thought, not in action. But once you go past the instance name, it has to authenticate you. Before you get to the instance name, there's really no way to authenticate you at all, except to be able to connect to that machine and go, does the machine exist? Yes, it does. Okay, you're connected to it via this BenBook 2. Once I get past the instance, it has to authenticate me. It has to tell me that I'm able to authenticate. So if I say dir here, it just authenticated me, and now it's showing me what's in my dir. Audits, availability groups, backup devices, credentials, databases, endpoints, all this stuff. You don't see this in the root of your instance. You see it, endpoints would be under server objects. Your job server is actually agent. So that's actually in a different realm. You have to expand job agent or SQL Server agent. Databases is underneath the server, but credentials, that's in security. backup devices, that's deep in some other, so it's not going to represent one-to-one for SSMS, okay? So just beware that it's not the way it is. All right, so I'm going to go into databases. Now, notice I did databases in lowercase. Now, what I should have done to prepare, and you can do this on your own, is once you get past the root of the instance and you've authenticated, all of the things that are PowerShell are case insensitive. But what if I was in a binary or a case sensitive collated server? I installed SQL Server as a binary collation, and now everything has to be case sensitive. If I do a CD, I have to do the proper case if I go manipulate an object. So if I do dir here, I have a few databases, but what's missing? I mean, what do you see that's missing? We don't see the system databases at all. In fact, they're just not there. If I say dir, I have DBA, DemoDB, and DropB. That's it. But do they still exist? Well, we know that the SQL doesn't function without system databases, so we're okay. But here's how you get it. You get to be a Jedi for a minute, and you do a dir with a dash force. If you use the force, you now see master model with MSDB and TempDB. So that's pretty cool. You get the option to see those. It hides them by default because there is a setting. If I do a dir of variable drive, you'll see there's this variable here that says SQL Server includes system objects. This is loaded when the SQL Server module is imported. And by default, the value is false. So it will not show, because it says include system objects and you said false, it will not show them. So if I wanted to see them, I either have to do force, or I can have something in my script that comes in here and says, I always want to see system objects and I don't want to have to keep on using force. So I just say system objects equals true. So include system objects equals true now. Now if I say dir without force, it just shows them. Now this include system object applies to tables and all objects in SQL. It will evaluate whether they're system objects or not, and they will hide them or show them depending on what you have here. So we're going to turn them back off just because I don't want to mess with them as far as what we're going to play with, but I wanted you to see that that's how you turn it off if you want it that way. Otherwise, you can just use force and they'll come in and be fine. All right, so that's the first thing. dir inside databases. If I wanted to get the database object and put it in a variable, I could do $DB equals get item. And it's different than get child item. Get child item is like doing a dir in a file system where you have multiple files coming back. I could do that, but I'm just going to get one database. I can say get item, and I can say DBA. Now in DB, if I do db.name, it'll tell me I got the DBA database. If I say db get type, it'll tell me I actually have an SMO database. So SQL Server Management SMO database. So I know I've got an object that now represents that object. So it's really kind of cool how powerful this is, because now if I wanted to drop it, I could do $db drop, which I won't do yet. We'll do later because I want this, I'm going to clone this. I'm going to make a new database so I can drop it. I need the DBA database because it has other stuff in it. But I can do a get item. I can do a dir into a variable. So I can say db list equals dir. And now I have db list. There's 3 of them. And if I do db list, it will show me just exactly the same thing as if I do a dir. So all of a sudden I get this in this file system, I'm pulling out databases. And if I go into the DBA database, cd into DBA database, look at my bottom path, /DBA, this is where you have problems if you're on a case sensitive server. As you can see, my CIAS says case insensitive. If I was on a binary, or if I was on a case sensitive, a CS server, then I would have to match the case to DBA, because the command goes back to SQL Server. Everything in this provider talks to SQL. So when I say dir, it goes and issues a query to SQL saying, give me all the databases. And so If I said CD space DBA and I said CD DBA small and I was on a case sensitive server, it wouldn't know what it wouldn't know where it is. It would say, I don't know what that is. Even though we're in PowerShell and it's lowercase, it's case sensitive in PowerShell. It is not once we start interacting with binary or case sensitive objects. All right, so that's enough of the foundation. The only thing I'll tell you in the foundation from here is the last piece is this view of name, status, size, space available. Notice compat dot level, and they're on separate lines. Just know that the property name is not compat dot level inside the object. It's actually compatibility level, one word, as the property. But this is what they call a default view. Microsoft has issued a file as part of the module called PS format types. So what that does for PowerShell is says, when I see this type, this is what I want to see. So in this case, the PS format type says whenever you see a database, you're going to show name, status, size, space available, recovery model, compat level, owner, collation, containment type in a table-like format. Okay, that's what it does. It spits it out in table-like format and it specifies the columns in its format. So that's what you see. If you didn't want to see the name, or if you didn't want to see the size and you only wanted name and status, you could do a dir and type that to select name, status. And there's only the columns you want. Okay? So just know that this is a view that SQL Server team decided that it would be pertinent to see, and it changes depending on the version of PowerShell Provider you use. But just know that this is just a view. It's not all the properties. If I wanted to see all the properties, I could do DB, which contains DBA, and type it to format list and do star, and it will show me every property, and you'll see it takes a minute to go get them all. And there's all my properties with all my values. So just know that there's lots more to that object than just what you see on the screen, but the default view shows you. Now, let's play. So we do a dir, we are in the DBA database. We're going to go into the DBA database, and we're going to see what's there. There's all sorts of things. We have application roles, we have certificates, we have column master keys, defaults, which is the defaults for columns. There's file groups, log files. They separate out files that are data files in file groups, and then they separate log files separately. Partitions, roles, rules, schemas, all the tables. We're going to go into tables. We're going to do a dir, and there's a few tables, right? Notice it doesn't show me any system. But there's DBO, name, and then there's row count. Ooh, that's interesting. Storage space used, index space used. That's more interesting. And then when it was created. Okay, so lots of cool information just by doing a dir. If you have lots of them, that might be a little troublesome because you'll scroll up and scroll up and scroll up and scroll up. But that's still possible. I can put any of these dirs into a variable, any of these get items into a variable and manipulate them. Okay, so I'm going to leave this alone, and we're going to go into a separate database. We're going to go into demo view, and we're going to go into tables here. And we have a few tables. So we have, I can't remember how many tables I have. I think I might have added 100 tables, so there's quite a few. Okay, maybe 60, 50. So there's about 60 tables. If I want to know, I can just do dir to measure object. And it will tell me how many. There's 52 tables, great. And again, doesn't include any system tables at all, so you don't have to worry about that. But say I wanted to draw, to script out all the tables. So we're going to go into a folder. And in this folder, we're going to, in the demo SQL Provider, we're going to create a folder called. And I know that in Management Studio, you can say right-click generate scripts. And it's really kind of cool. You fill out a dialog box and you click OK, and it does give you a script. Okay, so that's nice. So we're going to keep an eye on this tables folder for a second. So I'm in my provider, and I'm doing a dir, and I'm going to want to script these tables out. Now, I'm just going to do a basic script. I'm not going to really do anything that's hardcore with scripting options, but you can do it too. Dir, and then I'm going to say for each, and then open my script block. And this script block is going to let me say $_ which is the pipeline of the current item, .script. So .script is a method on an object of everything in SMO that's scriptable. And so I'm just going to do .script, and I'm just going to do that for now and just script it. So watch what happens. Here they come. There's one script. There's the next script. Come on, don't be slow. Here comes the next. It's scripting all my tables to my window. I'm like, oh crap, oh no, I want each. I don't want to copy and paste because it might run out of buffer. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it differently this time. So I'll do this, and I'll actually pipe this script into an add content. Now this add content function or commandlet allows me to add content to a file. It takes a path, and we're just going to say C:\demos SQL Provider, and remember we created a tables folder. And then I'm going to start constructing the name of my script file. So I want it to be named after the table, and I want it to have DBO or whatever the schema is on the name of the thing. So I'm going to start by saying I want the table. So that's the $_ because I'm in a table right here. I'm in the DemoDB tables folder, and I'm going to say I want the schema, and I want an underscore after that, and then I want to put the table name, and then I want to put SQL on the name, and then .SQL. So there's my name I want it to put in there. And because name and schema will be different for every table, I'll get individual files. Now, if I wanted to put them in one file, I could actually just do one name. I could just say script, and we'll do that in a second and show you what it does. But right now, I'm just going to type the script parenthesis, and add content to the cdemo SQL Provider tables as the schema and the name _SQL. I could put a date if I wanted to, put a date in here. In fact, let's just do it. We're going to do get-date with a format of YYYYMMDD. We're going to leave it there. Okay, so -F is for format. I'm gonna put a get date. I'm gonna format it into this YYY, which is the 4-digit year, the capital month, which will be 00010203, because I did a 2-digit, and then the day is a small dd, and that will be the day. And then I put SQL, and that ends my string. So now I'm gonna hit enter, and nothing's really happening here because we didn't say please display it. We just said put it in a file. I go into my file, and here it is, DBO invoices, table 1, table 2, with the date, 2020-06/30. So all of a sudden, I have all this stuff that is in these files. Now we're going to open one just for fun, and we're going to open it with Notepad. And as you can see, Notepad shows me that I have ANSI null on, order of identifiers on, and then it creates my table with my columns and on primary. So that's my script. Each one of them has been scripted. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop them all. That's pretty cool. I'm going to drop every one of them. In fact, let me show you the one that's temporal. There's a test temporal table here, and you'll see that it actually does script the things you need in here. So here's your sys start, sys end, and your period. So it scripts all the things you need to create this. It actually collates this as CIAS for a varchar 20, so because I didn't tell it not to script out collations, so it actually did. So let me go in here and drop these tables. Now I want to show you a different scenario of dropping the tables that actually is a little broken in this case from the perspective of SQL and code. So we're going to divest into SMO for a second. So let's go into, let's get the server here first. So server equals get item SQL Server : SQL Ben book to default. So now if I do server.getType, it will tell me that I actually indeed have a server. So now I'm going to get out of the provider for a second, and I'm going to say $server.databases with a bracket and demo DB. That's how I get the databases out of a collection in SMO. So I'm going to do that, and sure enough, there's my database. Great. Now I say .tables, and that's great. I mean, that's cool. But there's a little trick that you can use to execute something on these SMO things all alone. I mean, on all of the objects just by doing .drop. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But watch what happens when I do .drop. It comes back and says, "Ooh, red, blood on the ledger, not good." So let's read the message. An error occurred while enumerating through a collection. The collection was modified, which is, by the way, illegal in this case because the collection doesn't support it. So it was mad because I said .drop and wanted them to drop all the tables. Now what I'll show you is, let's see this invoices table. Watch what happens when I say server.databases.tables again. Notice that invoices is gone. So it actually did drop the first table, but that trick can't be used. It's terrible. And then you go, okay, we're going to be a little more tricky. So now we're going to pipe this thing to a for each, and then we're going to say $__drop. So now I am pulling each one out individually, and I'm dropping them individually. Now watch what happens here. Oh, I get the same message. Now again, table 1, it was pretty upset because the collection was modified, even though I did a for each, which in your logical mind says, hey, I'm pulling them out individually, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. But the reality is it's still tied to this collection.table. So it actually modified the collection and yells at you again. But if I say tables again, you'll notice that now table 1 is missing. That's kind of cool. But here's where the provider comes in. Oh, it's so amazing. Server. Here's where the provider comes in. I'm in tables, and I do a dir. Okay? And I don't see table 1, or I don't see the invoicing table, so that's fine. We know they're missing. But watch this. What if I do dir and pipe to remove item? This is what I do in a file system. I'd actually pipe it and remove item with the pipe. And watch what happens now. It says, okay, well, that's what you want to do. I'll just whack them. So it did a remove item. Now on the back end, this provider sent individual drop statements to SQL. So it wasn't in a collection like SMO. SMO was in a collection. It wasn't in a collection. This one is actually in a file system. So now if I do dir, they're all gone. Every table I just whacked. And by dang that, it just happened. Not a good thing, because now I don't have any tables. But what if I want them back? We saved them, right? They're right here. So how could I get them back? Well, that's where some fun comes in. This module has a function called invoke-SQL-CMD. And this invoke-SQL-CMD requires a server instance. Now, here's where the provider shines. Notice where I'm at in the provider. I'm in SQL Server, SQL Ben book to default. It knows where I'm at because I'm in it. I'm in that folder. And this SQL Server module has what it calls context. So when I'm in the server context of this, I don't have to specify server instance. It just assumes that where I am, it wants me to execute against that server. Now that's pretty dang cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to go into the database. Now I'm in demo DB, and there's very, 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 very few commands in this provider that go as deep as the database. And I'm going to omit database to see if that is one of them. I cannot remember, and that's why we're doing this, is to show you how you fool around with this thing. So we're going to omit database and we're going to go straight to the file. I can even do username and password if I have SQL authentication. We're going to show you SQL authentication for this guy in a minute. So I can do query, so I can do select star from sys.databases. And it uses, did you notice that? Using provider context, Ben Book 2 and database DemoDB. Invoke SQL CMD actually does go deep into the database and says, it's okay. In the context of DemoDB, I'm willing to use that context. Now, if I don't want to use the context and have it assume it, I can say suppress provider context warning if I don't want to see that message, or I can say ignore provider context. And it will no longer dive into my providers where I'm at, and it will require server and database to run. So that's kind of cool. So let's do this. We're going to do a dir of C demos SQL provider tables. And there's my table strings. Now, what if I wanted to execute all of these? I wouldn't be wanting to go and open up 52 files one at a time in Management Studio to do this. So I'm going to dir and type it to a for each. And then I'm going to say invoke SQL CMD. I'm going to assume the provider. So I have my Ben Book 2 and my DemoDB, so I don't have to specify that. And I can say input file and $__.colon. Ready? Using provider context, and I guess I could have said ignore provider context. It just executed all 52 of those, and if I do a dir, I'm still in tables, do a dir, and look at that. They're back. Invoices, table 1, 10, 11, 12, blah, blah, blah. And here's the other cool thing about the provider. It actually does a refresh and caches. So it allows you to cache. So what if I went into the window of SQL and connect to my Ben Book? Oh, this is a different connection. Let me add another. We're going to go into the connection of Ben Book 2. And we're going to change the database to whoa, that's okay. This is where you get to your other application. I want to change my database. Oh, this is it. You can tell how often. Oh, there it is. DemoDB. So we're going to connect here. And now we have DemoDB in here. And I'm going to open up tables here. I'm going to drop it in here. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy, and we're going to just do delete. It doesn't let you delete. That's awesome. Okay, we'll just do a query. We'll do the query. And we're in DemoDB right here, so we're good. We're going to drop table DTO. And run that. There went the table. So now if I go back to the provider and I do a dir, invoices is gone. But I didn't have to say refresh. But watch what happens inside the SMO, server.databases, DemoDB, tables. Oh, invoices is that because I didn't have any in and oh, but I dropped table invoices. Look at that, it's still there. It's still there. See, it's gone in the provider, but it's still there in my SMO because it read it into an object in memory. So it stayed that. So in order to change that, I would have to do dot refresh. And then dump tables, and now invoices. So the provider is directly connected to my instance, and if I say dir, it goes and gets them. It does know how to do diffs, whether I go drop it or not, but it caches it too. So I did dir here. It seems a little slow because it's going to get them. Now, we removed them, we put them back. That's pretty cool. So now what else can I do? Say I do cd, let's do dir inside tables and see what we can do. Oh, no. Tables, what if we want to go into the table? This is the other trick. Inside tables, the two-part name of tables is DDO and the name. You would think that you could do CD space schema and then CD DBO, but that follows the mentality of databases and then DemoDB. But the tables is special in that you have to say CD DBO dot table 1. Now my context is table 1. So that's just remember if you want to navigate down in there, I'm going to do a dir. And I have checks and columns, and let's go into columns. And I have indexes too, so indexes are there as well. I have ID and name. Now notice it just shows me name. Who cares? What if I want to see all of them? FL star. Now I get a lot of stuff. Okay, so you can select anything you want. Now, the provider's kind of cool in that way. And before I forget, I'm going to show you how to do a SQL authentication because I want to make sure that we do that. Let me go into query here. Go into query, you don't have to worry about dropping there. We're going to create login. We're just going to name it Ben with password equals password 1. So there's my login. And I could go see that in my provider as well. I'll do dir. Oh, I didn't like it. This is the and then I do dir and CD. We're going to CD the SQL Server SQL and do default login. And on to CD. Now I'm going to do so CD logins, dir, and now I see Ben. Okay, so we're going to use Ben to log in on to make a new PS drive. A new PS drive, and we're going to name it SQL off. And then we're going to say the PS provider of SQL Server because that's our provider. Our root is this is the key. I have to go at least to the instance level in order to authenticate. So I have to go SQL to default. I could go further. I could go databases. I could go databases DemoDB table. I could do all sorts of paths into that, but I have to at least go to the instance level. And now I get I can do description as well. I can persist it across my instance or against my session, or I can, and then I do a credential, and then you just do parentheses get credential. That lets me type in my username and password, so I do that, and now my username is Ben. My password is password 1, and now I get a new drive. You can see this SQL off. Because it's a file system provider, it wants to show used and free, but there really isn't relevance. My provider is SQL Server, and my root, you can't really see the root, but you see the little plus sign there? That gives you an indication that you are in SQL authentication. What's after the plus that you cannot see? We're going to do this. We're going to do get PS drive and select root. What you'll see is Ben book 2 default, then plus, and then Ben. So you know now that you're in SQL authentication. And you can actually say CD SQL Server equals Ben book 2 default plus Ben. Oh, it doesn't let me do it. Oh, it was not plus. Whoops. Oh, why did you do that? I remember there's a rule. Now I can't remember it. I didn't do it. Nope. I remember. Yeah, it doesn't like that, but it does not exist. But now I can't. Oh, CD SQL off. And now I'm in my SQL Server as that. So it usually lets you do this. It must be in the newer version. I downloaded the newest version. It used to let me actually do the CD with a plus, but apparently there's something I have to do differently than this. And I can't remember what I had to do when I was demoing it before. And this is one of the times when you wish. There you go. It's because the plus needed to be escaped. So I did a little back tick. And it lets me do this, but this is pretty long. I don't want to do all the plus bend. So that's why in the get PS drive, I had to create a name. So SQL auth is how I CD into that SQL auth. So CD SQL auth, and I'm now at the level of SQL bend book 2 default. Now I'm at the instance. If I do dir and say it's databases, now I have my list of databases. So that's pretty cool. The scripting's kind of fun. Anything you want to do with a dir and a pipe, anything you want to do with say indexes and you want to rebuild them, I could actually go into the DemoDB database, CD into tables, whoops, if you spell it right, CD into dbo.invoices, CD into, oh, because in the invoices I dropped, so that's a good thing that it didn't do that. I'll show you one more trick with the path provider. Table 10. Oh, come on. Tables, DemoDB. There are no tables? How rude. Oh, because, okay, so I didn't complete my path. See, this is why you play. I didn't create my login. I'm in DemoDB, so I'm going to create user Ben from login equals Ben. And run that. Oh. I'm challenging my T-SQL skills. Run that, and now I have a user. Now this should work. Oh, except I don't have permissions. So let's do alter role DB owner. Let's just, I don't have Management Studio. Anyway, if I want to finish this for you guys so you can see the last piece that I want to show you. But if I created a user and I did a dir, it would show me. Now it doesn't give me an error because the user's there. But if I had data reader or DB owner, I could see it now. But here's the power of the path. So here's my path. Path equals SQL Server. And we're just going to do server equals server s name equals Ben book 2 DB equals Ben DemoDB. And my table equals DBO dot, we'll say invoices. Okay, so now I have all my pieces in strings, and this could be parameters, this could be anything. But if I said test path, because path in PowerShell, paths are native, right? They just happen. So I could actually do test path and do path is SQL Server colon SQL, and then $s name, backslash default, because I forgot to put that in a variable, backslash databases, backslash demo or DB, yep, DB there, DB, backslash tables, backslash table. Now what that's going to do is it's going to replace all these variables in this string first, so I get Ben book 2, default databases, demo DB, tables, dbo.invoices. And I can use a test path to see if that table exists. It says false, but what if I do, what if table equals table 1? True, so it does equal. So all of a sudden, I have this option to use test path to get me what I want, or I can use get item with a path like this. I can say table or T equals get item, and then do this path. T.name is, oh, look, table 1. So I can get an item from a path as well, from outside the provider. I could be in C drive here, and it still works because my provider has been loaded. So all of a sudden, I have access to test path and native things. I could even do a remove item. remove, I'll just pipe T to remove item. And it just went away because it knows that it came from the provider because it puts certain things inside the object to say I'm a provider-based object. And now remove item works just fantastic, and I'm still in C drive. So this is a good nutshell behind the SQL Server Provider. Again, there's tons more things we could do, but I wanted to give you an idea of what you could do with the provider and why you should care. That, like I said, there's all sorts of functions in this module as well. If we showed you that, get command module SQL Server, you'll see that there are a lot of commands that you can use. Set SQL error log, backup SQL database. There's all sorts of commands in here that are very provider friendly. And so you have options with even the commands inside this module, not just the provider, to have some fun. So hopefully that was a good purview into the provider. There's plenty more we could do, but I wanted to make sure we got through most of that and showed you some things that we can do there. So let's go back and finish out. Oh, let's open for questions. We have, we can do, I'm open for the next 5-10 minutes. So if you have questions, please put them in the question portal. Otherwise, I appreciate your time, and we'll finish up in a second with things. All the finish up is really just letting you know that my email address again, my website, and then my GitHub. I will have all of these up on the GitHub DBA doc as well, as these will be on the meeting details as well. I'll send out a follow-up email later, a few minutes, and I'll send out the link to the archive meeting so that you can get access to the downloads. I'll put the downloads up here in about 10 minutes, and then you can get access to that. And then later tonight, I'll put them up on GitHub if you ever lose track of the link to go back to the presentation. So that's all I really had for slides and demo. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see if I can answer them. Oh yeah, one of the questions is about the SQL PS module. So there is a SQL PS module that is distributed with every instance of SQL that you install. And this is because the SQL agent uses the SQL PS module to execute PowerShell commands when you do a PowerShell job step. So they couldn't divorce it from it. So it's still out there. Just know that it's called SQL PS. It's not been updated since SQL 2016, June of 2016. It has not been updated since then. So it is deprecated and not useful. All the commands in the SQL Server module are updated, and bug fixes and stuff, and there's more, obviously. There's only about 49 in the SQL PS module. But you should use the SQL Server module in a pinch. You can import module SQL PS if you have not access to the SQL Server module. The SQL PS module has the provider the same way I just showed it to you. But it's old and whatever, but it still works if you need it in a pinch. But yes, there are different modules. The SQL Server module has been updated. The SQL PS module has not. Would you consider the SQL Server Provider to be complementary to DBA Tools? So they're two separate modules. DBA Tools has about 580 commands, and this one has about 100 and something. We're just going to show you. Get command with measure object. That has 113 commands. If we did DBA Tools, it would be about 580 something commands. And they're very complementary. They chose the SQL, so this prefix here, SQL stop SQL instance, set SQL. They chose to use SQL in the SQL Server Provider as a prefix. In DBA Tools, they use get-DBA something, so they never clash, even if the command is the same. But they are very complementary. Both of them do some things similar, and some do some that are not similar. And so you just pick your poison, as in PowerShell. You pick your module you love, and you use it for the commands you want. The unfortunate side is DBA Tools cannot replicate or duplicate the provider that's only available inside the SQL Server module. So that's different, but they are very complementary. I love DBA Tools. I've contributed to it. It's a great module. Are permissions credentials maintained to tables if they are removed and recreated using the provider? You can actually recreate an object via the provider. you can only read and manipulate them. So you can change properties, you can do all sorts, you can drop them. There is no create inside the PowerShell provider because it wouldn't make sense because it has to issue schema. So if I said new dash item and said I want to name it table 1, with what? I mean, what is the new item doesn't understand SQL. So there's no dash schema, there's no dash query. So you can't really create items with the SQL Server provider. You can read, drop, script, anything that SMO can do except for create. You can create objects in SMO, but that's not the topic of this. But everything inside the SMO, when you get it from the provider, it maintains in that object until it refreshes and realizes that object is gone. So if that, hopefully that answers your question. Thanks for the introduction. Good. Does the SQL module include any commandlets to document SQL components such as SSIS, SSAS, SSRS? There's really no documentation. You can write your own in that you can get the item. You can do get item database, and then it has all those properties. So you could then formulate your own documentation per se, put it in a JSON document, whatever. But there's really no doc thing. There is a SQL Server doc. If you Google on SQL Server doc, there is a way to document some things. There's also products from like SQL Century or Century One that's Doc Express, or that's what it used to be called. But they have a documentation tool as well. I think Redgate also has a SQL doc. So there's plenty of tools out there, but nothing in the module. Let's see, and will this session be saved on video? Yes, so this recording will be saved once we end. It will then formulate the thing, and I will upload it to the session, and there will be a link. Once it's uploaded, there will be a link to it on the session side that I'll send out tonight. I'll send out the link to the session because our meeting archive thing is broken, but it will have a link to the session, and at the bottom of the session details, there will be a link to the download that I'm going to include this transcript, and there will be a link to the video once it's uploaded. It takes a while for the video to process, so it'll be a little bit before I can upload it, but it will be there. And then it will be on Past TV as well, under the virtual PowerShell chapter or group playlist. There's a playlist on SQL Past TV, and it will be there as well. So that looks like all the questions I have. So thank you very much for coming, and follow me out there. I'm DBA Duck everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and all other places. So feel free to do that, and we'll catch you at the next installment of the PowerShell virtual group. Have a great day and stay safe. Be good.